The smell of oil and metal filled the small workshop, tucked away at the edge of a sleepy industrial town. Lena, a 22-year-old woman with sharp eyes and grease-streaked cheeks, was elbow-deep in a broken generator. Her father's voice echoed from across the garage, calling for a wrench, but she was too focused to hear. Tools clicked and clanked around her, the dance of work that had become second nature since she was a child. Her father, a humble mechanic known for fixing anything on wheels, had taught her everything about engines, but Lena had added something of her own, knowledge from books, classes, and sleepless nights studying engineering. She wasn't just good with her hands, she could outthink machines. That morning, however, brought a strange energy to the shop. A line of expensive black SUVs rolled up, interrupting the usual routine. People in suits stepped out. Then came a man in grey, radiating authority. Harold Trent, CEO of Trent Tech Engineering, adjusted his sleek watch and stepped into the dusty garage like he was entering a place beneath him. His designer shoes sank slightly into the oil-stained floor. He was there for a routine parts contract, or so he thought. As he scanned the room, his eyes stopped on Lena, who was now standing beside her father, wiping oil off her hands with an old rag. Harold frowned slightly, not used to seeing young women in garages, especially not ones who stood with confidence. "So, this is the shop?" he asked with a smirk. "Doesn't look like the kind of place that could solve our kind of problems." Her father greeted him respectfully, but Lena didn't flinch. "We might surprise you," she said. The CEO chuckled under his breath. "We'll see about that." He motioned to his team, who brought in a massive steel crate on a dolly. "This," he said, "is your test." Inside the crate was an experimental prototype engine, a project that had already drained thousands of hours and millions of dollars. It had failed consistently, shutting down mid-start or overheating without warning. Harold's engineers were stuck, and rumors had started to swirl about scrapping the design altogether. But Harold wasn't ready to admit defeat. He wanted a miracle, or more precisely, he wanted proof that no one else could fix it, so he could justify shutting it down. That's why he brought it here, to prove a point. "This engine is dead," Harold said. "Fix it and maybe you'll impress me. Fail and maybe you'll finally understand that some problems are bigger than you." Lena didn't blink. She stepped forward slowly, circling the engine like a predator studying prey. "Give me 1 hour," she said. Harold raised a brow. "You've got 60 minutes, he replied, "and every one of my engineers is watching." Lena opened the side panels of the engine with delicate precision, removing the casing to expose a jungle of wires, circuit boards, and fluid lines. The prototype was advanced, sure, but not flawless. She could already see mismatched components. Someone had used 2 incompatible control modules. The voltage regulator was pushing power unevenly, which could explain the engine's instability. She grabbed a screwdriver and started rewiring the ignition panel, then moved to recalibrate the thermal sensors. Her mind worked faster than her hands, anticipating the next 5 steps before completing the first. Harold watched from the other side of the room, arms folded, half expecting her to electrocute herself. His chief engineer whispered, "That's not in our manual." "Exactly," Harold muttered. "She's improvising. Dangerous." Lena continued to work without a word. The room grew quiet except for the clicking of tools and the occasional beep from her tablet. Sweat trickled down her temple, but her hands never shook. Outside the garage, workers and bystanders had begun to gather, curious about the young woman working on a machine even NASA minds had failed to understand. The room's tension thickened. As the clock ticked down, Lena, unbothered, made one final adjustment to a faulty fuel injection node. She glanced up. "We're ready." Her father handed her the ignition tablet. With a nod, she tapped the screen. For a split second, nothing happened. Then a low hum filled the air. The engine lights flickered, then glowed. Slowly, the turbine spun, building rhythm until a deep mechanical roar filled the shop. It was alive, not sputtering or wheezing, but running, smooth and strong. Gasps erupted around the room. One of Harold's engineers mouthed, "No way!" Harold's jaw clenched. He stepped closer, eyes locked on the control panel, then back to Lena, who stood with quiet pride. "What did you do?" he asked. Lena took a deep breath, wiping her hands again. "Your team used software meant for turbine engines on a piston hybrid system. That caused conflicting electrical signals and overheating. I rewrote the firmware, adjusted the thermal relays, and bypassed the miswired ignition array, and I replaced a sensor that was, well, installed backward." There was silence, except for the perfect hum of the now operating engine. Harold stared at her, stunned. His entire team was speechless. Lena's father tried to hide his proud smile, but his eyes gave him away. Finally, Harold forced a grin. "Well then, that's, unexpected." "Not really," Lena replied. "You just assumed I couldn't because I don't wear a lab coat." Harold's amusement faded. Her words hit him harder than the engine's roar. He turned to his team. "Get her resume," he muttered. "Now." One of the younger engineers walked over to Lena, eyes wide with admiration. "That was incredible," he said. "We spent weeks trying to stabilize the ignition core." Lena smiled kindly. "Sometimes the fix isn't in the machine, it's in the way you think about it." Another voice from behind them added, "We could use someone like you." Harold sighed, clearly trying to regain control of the narrative. "Let's talk. Contracts," he said. "I can make you an offer. Lead designer position, access to the lab, salary you won't believe." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Now you want to talk?" He laughed nervously. "You've made your point." She nodded slowly. "I'm listening, but I have conditions." That took Harold by surprise. No one had ever set terms to him, not fresh graduates and definitely not people from small-town garages. But Lena was different. She knew her worth. She crossed her arms, her stance calm but firm. "I want full control over the design lab. I'll pick my own team. And I want a program to mentor other young women in STEM, mechanics' daughters, single moms, anyone who never got the chance I did." Harold blinked. "That's bold." "So was underestimating me," Lena said, her voice soft but steady. The room held its breath. A few people exchanged looks, impressed. Harold finally nodded. "Done." He extended his hand. "Welcome to the future, Miss Lena." She shook it, but her grip was stronger than he expected. Around them, the engine purred like it had found its rightful master. Her father stepped up and whispered, "You just changed everything, kiddo." She smiled, eyes shining. "No," she said, "I just proved what I already knew." Lena's first day at the Trentech lab was nothing like the dusty garage back home. The building was a sprawling complex of chrome and glass, with floors that gleamed like mirrors and screens that followed her as she walked. Some staff greeted her kindly, curious and welcoming. Others whispered behind her back, surprised that a young woman with no Ivy League pedigree had been granted such power so quickly. She didn't care. She walked the halls like she belonged, because she did. Her lab was on the top floor, a bright space filled with tools, robotic arms, and a full-scale testing bay. She had a few familiar faces already, young engineers she'd invited after Harold approved her mentorship program. She named it Wrench, Women Rebuilding Engineering, Navigating Change and Hope. Her plan was simple: fix what was broken inside the machines and the industry. Within weeks, her lab became a hub of innovation. Her team wasn't the biggest, but it was the fastest growing. They developed modular engine cores, AI-assisted diagnostics, and even a handheld scanner that could detect circuit faults in seconds. What shocked the board most wasn't her inventions. It was the efficiency. Lena's team finished in days what others took months to plan. She wasn't just fixing engines anymore. She was rebuilding the way people approached engineering. Word spread fast. A documentary crew requested to follow her team. Colleges invited her to speak. But what Lena loved most were the letters from girls across the country. "I didn't know I could do this," one wrote. "Now I want to learn." Her father visited often, bringing her mum's homemade pies and refusing to sit in the CEO's office, preferring the engine room. "You haven't changed a bit," he said once. Lena smiled, "but everything else has." Still, not everyone celebrated her rise. Harold, his longtime lead engineer Dr. Grant, had grown bitter. He saw Lena's fame as a threat to his legacy. "She's just a mechanic's daughter," he'd mutter, echoing Harold's own words from months ago. But unlike Harold, Grant hadn't changed. One afternoon, while Lena was fine-tuning a rocket propulsion prototype, she noticed inconsistencies in the design data. It wasn't her team's work. She traced it back to a file marked "Urgent Update" sent from Grant's department. But the update contained an error, a dangerous one. If it had gone unnoticed, it could have caused a lab explosion. Lena confronted him in front of the board, her voice calm but unshakable. This wasn't a mistake, it was sabotage. The room fell silent. Grant tried to protest, but Harold had seen enough. Security escorted him out. Lena didn't gloat. She just turned back to the board and said, "This is what happens when ego becomes policy." After that, Harold changed. His admiration for Lena became open support. He introduced her at board meetings, quoting her ideas, even defending her against corporate skeptics. They weren't friends, not quite, but there was mutual respect now. One day he invited her to a summit with global aerospace leaders. "I want you to present our latest propulsion model," he said. "You designed it. They should hear it from you." Lena agreed, on one condition. She'd also introduce her mentorship team on stage. The event took place in a massive hall. Cameras everywhere. Lena walked out to applause, standing tall in her boots and jumpsuit. Not a dress, not a suit, just herself. Her voice didn't tremble. "You don't have to look like me," she told the crowd, "but you better believe there are more like me out there, and we're not waiting for permission anymore." Back home, her father watched the broadcast on an old TV in the garage, wiping his eyes with a greasy rag. "That's my girl," he whispered. In the lab, Lena's team celebrated with cake and music. The youngest intern, a shy coder named Mia, approached her. "I used to think I wasn't smart enough," she said. "Now I'm building things I didn't even dream of." Lena hugged her. "You were always smart. The world just needed to catch up." The next day, they launched a new open-source platform for students and hobbyists. Engineers from around the world started contributing. A girl in India submitted a new blueprint. A boy in Brazil adapted their circuit tool for solar farms. Lena watched it all happen with quiet joy. This was bigger than just an engine now. It was a movement. Then came the phone call that would test everything. NASA. They'd been tracking Lena's work, impressed by her propulsion innovations. They had a problem. An engine core on one of their upcoming Mars transport modules was behaving erratically. The engineers couldn't pinpoint the issue. They asked Lena to consult. Her team flew to the Kennedy Space Center. Standing among rocket shells and astronauts, Lena felt that familiar fire inside. "Show me the specs," she said. Hours passed as she analyzed the core, tracing power surges, calculating airflow deviations, and running simulations. She found the issue. A minute lag in the ignition sequence caused micro-vibrations that destabilized the chamber. She redesigned the sequence, ran a test, and it worked. The NASA lead clapped his hands. "Incredible. You may have just saved." "This launch," Lena just smiled. "It's what I do." Back at Trent Tech, the board held a celebration in her honor. This time it wasn't just engineers in the room, it was partners, investors, and students. Harold raised a toast. "We once brought a broken engine to her to prove she couldn't fix it. Turns out she fixed us instead." The room applauded, but Lena didn't bask in it. She walked over to the podium and said, "If you're clapping, for me, you're missing the point. Clap for the next girl in a garage, the next dad teaching his daughter how to hold a wrench. Clap for the minds we haven't met yet, because they're coming, and they'll change everything." Silence followed, then a standing ovation. Her father in the back just shook his head and whispered, "You really were born for this." That night, alone in her lab, Lena stared out the window at the stars. The engines were silent now, the lights dimmed, but her mind was racing. There was more to build, more to fix, more to change. The future wasn't waiting. It was already here. And it had grease on its hands, sparks in its eyes, and courage in its chest. Lena smiled to herself, picked up her wrench, and got back to work.